Welcome to Drive the Daf, clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Yoma Daf Yud Aleph is completely about the Halachos of mezuzah. The Gemara will begin discussing the gates of the Basin and whether or not they had a mezuzah. Then it'll move on to other types of gates in other walls, whether they need a mezuzah or not. The Gemara will then go on to discuss different types of structures and their uses as to whether they require a mezuzah based on their use. The Gemara will afterwards discuss different shapes of doorways that require a mezuzah, and then different ownerships of houses, which ones require a mezuzah and which ones do not. So the Gemara first begins by referring to a machlokes which we have seen between two Tanaim, machlokes Tanaim between the Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda, as to whether the mezuzah which was on the Lishkas Parhedrin, the room in the Basin in which the Kohen Gadol was lodged for 7 days before Yom Kippur, whether that had a mezuzah midoraisa or the mezuzah was only midorabanan. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it was only midorabanan. So the Gemara is a kasha from a brisa which discusses the gates of the Basin Mikdash, and it says that all the gates of the Basin Mikdash did not have a mezuzah with the single exception of Shar Nikanor, because that was the gate through which one would enter if he was heading to the Lishkas Parhedrin. The implication is that since the Lishkas Parhedrin required a mezuzah, the gate that led to the Lishkas Parhedrin also required a mezuzah. Now the Gemara assumes that means that as a gzeira derabanan, to make sure that the mezuzah of the Lishkas Parhedrin was good, they also had to have one on the gate leading to it to increase the understanding that this was a mezuzah structure, that this was a dwelling structure, and not a prison of some sort. So the Gemara asks that according to the Chachamim, that the mezuzah on the Lishkas Parhedrin is a doraisa, so I understand that the mezuzah on the gate leading to the Lishkas Parhedrin could be midrabanan, a gzeirat that you should have one on the outer entrance to the Lishkas Parhedrin as well. However, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that the Lishkas Parhedrin's mezuzah itself was only midrabanan, why would they add another derabanan on top of a derabanan? It's a gzeira l'gzeira. You don't add another rule on top of a rule which is already derabanan and make a requirement for a mezuzah on the Shar Nikanor just because it's leading to the Lishkas Parhedrin. So Gemara says it's not a separate gzeira. It was all part of the same gzeira in the first place. The idea was that they wanted to make sure that the place where the Kohen Gadol would stay would have the appearance of a home, and wanted to have a mezuzah. So together in one shot, they said in order to have the appearance of a home, it should have a mezuzah on its gate and on the gate that leads up to it. Okay, now on the topic of mezuzahs on gates, the Gemara brings a brisa that learns from the word bisharecha. The Torah says you should have mezuzah on your gates. It should be, you should have on the gates to your homes, the gates to your yards, the gates to your countries, the gates to your cities. All these things require a mezuzah. Like it says, you should write it. You should write this parsha of Shema. That's what it is in context, on the mezuzahs of your house and on your sharecha and on your gates. So the Gemara says, Abai asked Rav Safra that the gates of the city of Mechuzah don't have a mezuzah, and he wanted to know why not. Mechuzah is a city which is primarily Jewish. There's no reason that there shouldn't be a mezuzah there. So the Gemara says that Rav Safra answered that the gates there, the archways which formed the gates, were actually not built there as an entrance. They were built to hold up the building. The structure was on top of them. An archway is a very strong shape, and therefore those arches were built to hold the rooms above them, the offices that they had above these arches. So the Gemara says, well, Abaye asked, well then all the more reason that it should have a mezuzah, because those archways are through which one needs to pass in order to access the building above. And any time you have to pass through a doorway of some sort to get to a building above, it certainly needs a mezuzah. Like we have another brisa that says that a shul requires a mezuzah if the lodgings of the shamish of the shul are in the shul building, so then the shul itself requires. So here, there are people who live in those offices upstairs of the gates. Who are they? They are the watchers, the guards that watch the entrances, or whatever it is they watch over there. So therefore, Abai rejects Rav Safra's reason. He says that the reason that the gates of Mechuzah don't have a mezuzah is not because they are just serving to strengthen the wall that they are in. It is because there is a danger involved in putting mezuzah on the entrance to the gates of the city, and that's that the local king would think that there is kishuf, that there's some kind of black magic involved with this thing that you're sticking on his gates, and therefore he didn't allow it. Now, in order to show that there is a danger involved in mezuzahs, so the Gemara quotes a story that happened which is brought in a brisa. The brisa says that a mezuzah is supposed to be checked twice every 7 years, 2 times in 7 years. But a public mezuzah that's in a public place only has to be checked once in 50 years. Rashi explains that we don't want to place too many difficult responsibilities on the public, because then nobody will do it at all. If it's doable, if it's not too difficult, people will do it. But if it's too difficult, everybody will end up saying somebody else should do it. So the Basin continues, and Rabbi Yehuda says that there was an incident that happened in the upper marketplace of the city of Tzipori, and there was someone called Artavan. Either that was his job or that was his name. But Artavin, so he went to check the mezuzah in the marketplace, and he was accosted by a police officer, and he ended up penalizing him 1,000 zuz. So you see, it's a dangerous situation. So the Gemara asks, how could that be? He was in the middle of doing a mitzvah. Don't we have a rule that shluchei mitzvah don't get into trouble? They aren't harmed. So what happened over here? So the Gemara says, obviously this is a very common, dangerous situation to be checking mezuzahs. Then a situation where the danger is common, we do not say the rule that one is protected by being on the way to doing a mitzvah. The Gemara proves that from a pasuk when Hashem sent Shmuel to go anoint somebody in place of Shaul. Shmuel said, how could I go? Shaul's going to kill me if he finds out. And Hashem said, okay, we'll disguise your trip. We'll say that you'll take some oxen with you, and it'll appear like you're going to bring a karbonos, but it shouldn't be obvious. But the what's apparent from here is, although Shmuel is going to do a mitzvah and it's on a specific command from Hashem, still there could be a danger that Shaul would kill him for going to anoint someone else. The Gemara now begins a new subtopic, and it launches into an exploration of what type of usage makes a building or a room require a mezuzah. Generally, we know that a mezuzah is on a place in which a person lives. The Gemara wants to know, what about storage rooms? Does that count as a place in which a person lives or not? So the Gemara says that there are other factors involved here as well. Number one, sometimes the storage room is used for a degrading purpose. We know that a bathroom doesn't require a mezuzah because its purpose is degrading. It is an unclean purpose. You don't put a mezuzah with Hashem's name on it in a room like that. On the other hand, sometimes the storage room can actually be used for some living purposes. People could use it for living to some extent. So the Gemara has 3 levels of storage rooms. A plain storage room, which is only used for storage. A storage room which is also used for degrading purposes. That's a lower possibility that it requires mezuzah, and a higher level that is sometimes used for some living purposes, some actual activities go on in there. So the Gemara says that it's going to be a machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Kahana how you interpret a brisa. The brisa says as follows. It says that a storehouse of straw, cattle, wood, wine or oil, or other types of storage, the Basin says it is pater, does not require a mezuzah, and then it links that to the fact that women are ne'osos behem, and women take pleasure in them. So the Gemara says, what does that mean, ne'osos behem? So Rav Kahana understands that it means that women use it for bathing, and therefore we're talking here about a storage house which is used for degrading activities where people stand undressed, and therefore a regular middle-level plain storage house or a higher level storage house in which home activities take place, either of those two will be chayev and mezuzah. The only reason that this brisa says that one is pater in a mezuzah is because it's the lowest level storage house in which degrading activities take place. Now Rav Yehuda disagrees, and Rav Yehuda says no, naosos doesn't mean degrading activities like bathing. Naosos means that they use it to perfume themselves, which is a type of house activity, and therefore this is the highest level of storage house. And it means to tell you that even though it's the highest level of storage house, it's still pater from mezuzah. So it comes out as follows. According to Rav Yehuda, all types of storage houses, even ones in which you do normal home activities such as perfuming oneself, they all do not require a mezuzah at all. According to Rav Kahana, only the lowest level, which is used for bathing, doesn't require a mezuzah, but a regular one that's just for storage, or a higher level one, those two will both require mezuzahs. So now Rav Yehuda brings a brisa to support his position that a regular plain storage house, at least, does not require mezuzah, and the brisa says that a cattle barn does not require a mezuzah. So you see a clear proof to him. So Rav Kahana responds and he says there must be that there's a machlokes tanaim, and I'll prove to you that you have to say there's a machlokes tanaim because you hold that a middle level and a higher level storage house do not require a mezuzah. I'll show you a clear brisa that definitely says that a higher level storage house does require a mezuzah, and it says as follows: a cattle barn does not require a mezuzah, but the ones that women use to perfume themselves, those do require mezuzah. So this one clearly says that a higher level storage house does require mezuzah. So it says Rav Kahana Tavhid as follows: you're going to have to agree that there's a machlokes Tanaim about a higher level storage house because you yourself hold that it doesn't require mezuzah, and you have a brisa, your understanding of the brisa, which we argue about its proper interpretation. You say that that's referring to a higher level storage house, and it's teaching me that it doesn't require mezuzah. But I just showed you a brisa that a higher level storage house that women use to perfume themselves does require mezuzah. So you're clearly saying that that's a machlokes. So there's no problem. I'll tell you that there's a machlokes as well about a middle level storage house, and therefore you brought me a brisa that says that it does not require mezuzah. I hold that it does require mezuzah and that it's a machlokes tanaim, and therefore your brisa is not a kasha on me at all. The Gemara now brings another brisa, and Rav Kahana and Rav Yehuda will both have to interpret the brisa in a way that fits with each of them, and the Gemara will explain how they'll each understand it. The brisa has three parts to it. The brisa says that a standard storage house is a machlokes whether it requires a mezuzah or not. A standard degrading house does not require a mezuzah. And examples of that, the brisa gives a bathroom, a restroom, a tanning house, a bath house, place where that is a place where the public comes to bathe, a mikveh room, and a place where it was shahanoshim naosos behen, that's the women take pleasure in. That's the same word used in the previous brisa, which we weren't sure if that refers to a place where they bathe or a place where they anoint themselves with perfume, and that's considered to be a home operation. So again, the first part of the brisa said that it's a machlokes whether a standard storage room requires mezuzah, and as examples of that we said was listed storage of straw, cattle, wood, and other storage, which refers to wine and oil. A place of degrading activities definitely does not require mezuzah, and a place that women take pleasure in, which again we don't know what that means, that is pater from mezuzah, that does not require a mezuzah. So how are you going to understand this? So Rav Kahana says, look, I hold that a general storehouse does require a mezuzah. This brisa says it's a machlokes. That's fine. As I've been trying to prove to Rav Yehuda that there's a machlokes on the subject, he brought me a brisa that it does not require a mezuzah. I say that there is a machlokes on the subject, so this brisa does support that. Now, as far as degrading, that we all agree does not require mezuzah. When it says that a place that the women are neosos does not require mezuzah, that's referring to a situation, that's referring to a place where they bathe, because if it would be regular or above, a middle level or a higher level, then it would require a mezuzah. Now, the problem is, if it's referring to a place where they bathe, how is that different than a bathhouse that's mentioned specifically in the brisa separately? So he'll explain that there's a difference. You have to mention both of them, because a bathhouse is used by the public, and therefore it smells very bad, and it's a very, very degrading place. You may not think that a place that just one woman uses in her house to bathe, or in her personal storage house, you may not think that that is also pater from mezuzah, and therefore the brisa has to tell me that it is pater from mezuzah. That's how Rav Kahana explains this, that it fits with him. Now, Rav Yehuda learns this brisa differently, because he holds, remember, that any standard storage house, not a higher level or an upper level, he holds that there's no machlokes, that it is clear that everybody agrees that it does not require a mezuzah. The only place he says that there's a machlokes is about a higher level storage house where there are home activities that take place there. So he learns the brisa as follows. He says when it talks about a standard storage house, it doesn't quote a machlokes at all. The brisa, when it says that there is a machlokes, is referring to an upper level storage house. And when it says that women are neosos in it, it's saying the type of storage house, even one which is used to store all the things that are listed. If it's also used for women to perfume themselves, then it's a higher level. It has home activities storage house. That's where there's a machlokes. If it's a standard storage house, there's no machlokes. Everybody agrees that it is pater from a mezuzah. And if it's a lower level which is the same as if it's a middle level, is also part from mezuzah, and the reason is because there's a smell, like we said earlier, and it's a degrading activity. So now the Gemara has a kasha. The Gemara says that you all now mean to tell me that Rabbi Yehuda holds that there's no machlokes about a standard storage house, that it definitely does not require a mezuzah according to all opinions. There's no brisa that holds that it does. The Gemara says it can't be, because I'm going to show you a brisa which clearly says that a middle level storage house does require mezuzah, and the Gemara quotes the brisa as follows. It says, it explains different types of uses based on the psukim, whether they require mezuzah or not. So it says that the word bisharechel, that teaches you that gates of houses, gates of courtyards, gates of countries and cities all require a mezuzah. It also includes a barn, a chicken coop, a strawery, a place where you keep your straw, storehouses of wine and oil. All these places are chayev in mezuzah. So you see here that this brisa clearly says that is chayev in mezuzah. Now let's just finish the brisa before we see what Rav Yehuda is going to do with this. Brisa says further, you may also think that you should need a storage house for an open area, an chsadra that leads into your house, or for a veranda, that's a porch which leads up to your house, or it's an access point for many apartments on an upper floor. So we know that that's not true because the Torah says bais. It has to be a house, and these are not houses. People don't live in these walkways. They don't live in these open entrance areas. Now, what about a bathroom, a tannery, bath house, and a mikvah? No, you can't be that either because it says bais. A bais is a place where you do respectable things, and these things are not respectable things. Now, what about har bais and the offices of the Azara and other Azaros, the various different regions of the Basin Mikdash? That's also excluded by the word bias, because the word bias is chol, is without any kedusha, as opposed to the Basin Mikdash, which has kedusha. So again, the Brisa clearly said that you are chayiv in a standard storage house, and Rav Yehuda said not. Rav Yehuda said it's not even a machlokes. So the Gemara therefore says it's to Yufta. It definitely rejects Rav Yehuda's position. And it's for sure at least a machlokes about the subject. You cannot say that it is clear, and there's no Tana who argues on it. Okay, now the Gemara says that Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda said in front of Rava, there are 6 types of gates or doorways which do not require mezuzah. And he said they are as follows: a storage house of straw, of cattle, of wood, or other types of storage. Also an archway, and a gate that has no top. It's just walls, it has no top on top at all. And a gate which is less than 10 tvachim high. It's got to be at least 10 tvachim high, otherwise it doesn't require mezuzah. So the Gemara says he asked, Rava asked him, you told me you're going to tell me 6 things, then he told me 7 things. So he said no, because one of them is a machlokes tanaim, and that's an archway. An archway is a machlokes tanaim, and it's a machlokes between Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim whether an archway requires a mezuzah or not. And now the Gemara narrows down and explains where is there a machlokes at all. If the legs of the arch, the straight part on the sides of the archway, are at least 10 tvachim high, there's definitely no machlokes, because the minimum size of a doorway is 10 tvachim high by 4 tvachim wide. A doorway that has 10 tvachim by 4 tvachim space opening, that definitely requires a mezuzah. So if the archway has that space in it, because its side legs go straight up for 10 tvachim, that definitely requires a mezuzah. There's no machlokes. Abaye says there's also no machlokes about the following cases. If the arches begin at the ground or within 3 tvachim of the ground, it starts curving, there's no machlokes about that, because it's considered to be attached, connected to the ground, because it's curving already within 3 tvachim of the ground. If the height of the archway at the top doesn't reach the 10 tvachim, there's no machlokes about that either, because there is definitely no space of 10 tvachim altogether. The maximum center height of the arch doesn't reach to 10 tvachim high. Where is there machlokes? Machlokes is where the archways are at, where the legs are between 3 tvachim to 10 tvachim high. The gap, the highest point of the arch, reaches to at least 10 tvachim high, and it is 4 tvachim wide at the legs. That way, you have an archway, which if you were to draw if you were to square off the arches, and you would extend the legs straight up through the wall, through the solid part over the arch, through the wall, and then you would square it off at the top, where the top of the arch hits. you would have a space which is 10 tfachim high and 4 tfachim wide. Also, it doesn't begin arching within 3 tfachim of the ground. What's the machlokes? Machlokes is, do you look at that? Can you draw lines in the wall and say, look, we're going to look at these lines and these will be our doorway? It happens to be filled in more than that, but you could ignore the filled in part. This doorway space is there, and you could just use that. That's what we call chokik in lahashim. Do we carve it out in order to create the shear? And that's what is machlokes between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. Do we say that that is counted as a doorway or not? Okay, moving along, the Gemara brings a brisa, and the brisa discusses the types of ownership that make a house chayv in mezuzah or not. And it says as follows: a shul, or a house owned by a woman, or a house owned by partners, is obligated in a mezuzah. The Gemara says, why would I think not? The Gemara says, because the Torah says, beischa. It has to be your, in the masculine form, your house. So that means your singular house, not your plural house, not a house that's owned by plural people, therefore not a house that's owned by partners, or a house that's owned by the public, like a shul. And it would also exclude a house that is owned by her, because it says a house is owned by the male singular, beischa. So Gemara says, okay, well then maybe that should be the halacha. How do you know that that's not true? The Gemara says no, because the reason that the Torah gives this, it says, if you do this, then you will have a long life, long days and long years. So everybody requires long life and long days and long years, and even women and even partners. So therefore they are obligated in mezuzah just like anybody else. So Gemara says, so then what's the purpose of the term beischa? Why does it use the singular masculine form? So Gemara says, to tell me derech bi'ascha, the way that you walk, the way that you come in, the way that you enter. It's not beischa, your singular plural house. It's meant to be a drasha for derech bi'ascha, the way that you walk in, which it teaches me that the mezuzah has to be on the right side of the doorway when you're coming into the house, because when people walk in, they usually start walking with their right foot, and therefore it should be on the right side of the doorway. That's called the derech bi'ascha. Okay, now on a similar subject, the Gemara now goes to the halachos of a house that has tzaras. We know the halachos is that a house that has tzaras has a very complicated and costly procedure to get the tzaras removed, and sometimes the house will even have to be destroyed if the tzaras keeps returning. The question is, does these tzaras halachos apply to all types of homes, or only to some types? And the Gemara says that this very similar structure as to what we said about mezuzah applies to homes. And so it says as follows. The brisa says a shul, or a house that's owned by partners, or a house that's owned by a woman, does have tumas nagaim. It is susceptible to the halachos of tzaras. Gemara says, why do I think not? Gemara says, because the Torah says that ubasher lo habayis, the one who, masculine singular form, lo, that he owns the house, that he, the one who he, singular, owns the house, not they, and not she, that's the term that's used to say that he has to come and deal with the issue of the house. He has to go speak to the Kohen to take care of it. So the Gemara says, so it says the masculine singular form. I would think that excludes partners, it excludes the shul, and it excludes woman's house. So the Gemara says, so how do you know not? So the Gemara answers, no, it's not restricted to that, because the Torah defines the house that's susceptible to tzaras as beveis eretz achuz aschem, in the land which you inherited. Any house which is in Eretz Yisrael is susceptible to these halachos. So the Gemara says, so why does it use the masculine singular form of lo? So the Gemara says to read it as follows: Asher lo habayis, lo, it doesn't just mean to him the house is, but the one who makes the house, he's very about, it's his, it's mine. He's very stingy about his house and everything that's in it. And that will be the reason that he'll end up getting tzaras, because people ask him to borrow things, and he'll say, I don't have it, I don't own one, I don't have a lawnmower to lend you, and then he's going to get tzaras on his house, and a part of the procedure is he'll have to empty everything out of the house and put it outside in the street, and everybody will say, oh, you do have a lawnmower, you do have a saw, I see that you have all these things which you said you do not have. The Gemara now asks, based on what you're saying here, shul is susceptible to the halachos of tzaras. The Gemara says, is that true? I have a brayso that seems to say that it's not. It says you may think that a shul and a beis medrash is susceptible to the halachos of tzaras, and you can tell that it's not, because it says asher lo habayis, that it only belongs to someone, that the house belongs to him, not to shul and a beis medrash that do not have a single owner. So the Gemara says it's a machlokes tanaim between Rabbi Meir and the Rabbana. We see there machlokes in Hilchos Mezuzah. a house, a shul that has an apartment in it for the shamish, where Meir and the Chachamim, Brisa says, agree that is chayiv in mezuzah. If it does not have an apartment, Rav Meir says it's chayiv in mezuzah, and the Chachamim say it's not. So Rav Meir will also say that it's chayiv and it's susceptible to tzaras, and the Chachamim will say it's not susceptible to tzaras, and that's why there's two contradictory brises on the subject. The Gemara says, or I could tell you that they're all the Chachamim, and one is talking about one that has an apartment, where the Chachamim agree it's susceptible to tzaras, and one is talking about where it does not have an apartment, where the Chachamim say it's not susceptible to tzaras. Or the Gemara says I could even tell you that we're talking about a shul which does not have an apartment, but is different types of shuls. A shul in a big city, and a shul in a small little village. A shul in a big city that counts as belonging to the public, that doesn't have any specific owner, and therefore that is not susceptible to tzaras. That doesn't count as asher lo habayis. But a shul in a little village is probably in one little house, or it looks like a little house, and doesn't look like it's owned by many people, and therefore it is susceptible to tzaras.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.